Ready when you are. Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock and time for the St. John Daily Word. I'm Pastor Ron Genaro, and I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving as this is Thanksgiving week. And I want to tell you that we will not have a Daily Word on Thursday. Janine and I are going away for a couple of days, and then we'll be back. But we want you to, you can go back and look on our Facebook page, the St. John Facebook page, and find Thanksgiving messages from 6 and 5 years ago. It'll tickle your funny bone. That's where we had a turkey and a chicken, and they talked about which was the best for a meal. Sort of defeated their own self-interest. But anyway, we are glad to have you here today. We're going to be finishing up the book of Exodus. We're in the last 2 chapters today, and we will finish. And then we will meet the next 3 weeks, but we will look at the birth narratives of Christ in our Bible study. So we welcome you. I have several announcements for you. I want to remind you that Sunday services are 7:45 and 9:30 a.m. with the 9:30 service live streamed. And I have a special invitation here for you as well, and that is that we are celebrating 60 years of ministry this Sunday. And so I will not be preaching, but I will have our conference superintendent, Reverend Jay Therrell. He's going to come and bring the message and talk about, he's got an interesting sermon title. It's Hope and It's a Wonderful Life. And which then got me thinking I should do a series next year for the Advent season using all of the Christmas movies that are favorite. You know, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas and some of those things. Faith and Fitness meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays, except they met today. They won't meet this Thursday. They won't meet next Tuesday because of spaghetti dinner, and this Thursday because of Thanksgiving dinner. Popsicle Ministry will not be taking place this week because the kids are off school this week, but it will be next week. The Ladies' Christmas Social will be Saturday, December 20th at 1 p.m. at the Island View Restaurant. The cost is $23. We're going to have more information and sign-up things for you. It's going to be a slip that you sign up and drop it in, and you make your selection as to the menu. And I don't have any of that information yet. I show up to pack things up and unpack things. That's about it. The wake-up call, we're still continuing that. That will end this Friday with their Gospels, reading through the Gospels 1 chapter at a day. But I encourage you to continue on with them. It's a great devotional, and I love now that you can watch JD on a YouTube thing. Judy, are you watching him or listening to him? Well, watching him is now a game because my wife and I are trying to figure out what room he's in. It looks like a garage, but we're not sure. Because there's a couch, there's a motorcycle, a couch, a shopping cart. I mean, it's like a hodgepodge of stuff. And the other day when we were watching, he had somebody else in the back, like picking stuff up. We're not sure what was going on. It's just odd. Next time I see JD, I'm going to ask him about it. We also want you to know that this Sunday we will be receiving the children's home offering because it's a 5th Sunday and so that's for Residing Hope. Formerly known as the Florida United Methodist Children's Home. We are one of their generous congregations, and I want to talk to you a moment about generosity because I'm just so proud of this congregation. We're sending out $3,500 for Jamaica. We rounded up. It came into like $3,427 or $37. And so we're sending that out. And at the same time, the Turkey Roundup collected $3,500. That's gone out. And so that's $7,000. And then on Sunday, we did $1,500 for Champion for Children. So in the last month, or 3 weeks or so, we have collected nearly $10,000 for charities out and over beyond us. It is amazing. This is the most generous congregation I've ever seen or served. Spaghetti dinner, December 2nd, that's next Tuesday. We will be meeting for Bible study, but But we're gonna setup will be a little different because of what we're studying. But at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and 6 o'clock, there are spaghetti dinner tickets. There will be dinner. The 5 o'clock dine-in is sold out. I don't know how close the takeout is on that one, but we do also need you to know that tickets will be available this Sunday, and that'll be the cutoff. Although there are tickets available at the door for the 4 and 6 o'clock. Don't try to just drop in at 5. You'll have to wait. It'll be packed. The Beatitudes and Brunch ends this Sunday. Pastor Dorman should be back. I understand he's on his way. May even be back today or tomorrow. But he's supposed to be back and teaching that this Sunday. And then the following Sunday in December, first Sunday in December, through January, with the exception of the Sunday between Christmas and New Year's, Pastor Joe Anderson is going to be leading, and it says in the education building, we have to fix that, it's in the fellowship hall. It's going to be Israel, the footsteps of Jesus. He has a presentation that he has worked on, and it was in preparation for folks who would go with him on trips, and he has several of them. He's got enough material he's been there over 25 times. And so he's going to teach that, so he's going to show you some of the archaeology and some of the things, and some of those things, and it should be very interesting. Thanksgiving office hours we close tomorrow at noon, and we are closed Thanksgiving Day. We are normally closed on Friday also. The building committee will be meeting next Thursday at 10 a.m. in the education building. That is the correct building, the education building. And Parkway Food Ministries, we're always collecting for them. We are taking a check over to them also today to help them with their Thanksgiving plans. So we're going to begin with a word of prayer, and we're going to pray for Bob also. Bob is not going to be with us next week, and he's going to have some time off for good behavior, hopefully. Hopefully he will behave. Bob's going to have a total hip replacement, outpatient. It's amazing. As long as everything goes well, and that's next Tuesday while we're meeting for Bible study, he's going to be in surgery. He said he couldn't run the controls from there. We're automated pretty good, but not quite that good. So we're going to pray for Bob and Paula, who's driving him back and forth. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you and praise you for your presence with us. We especially lift before you Bob and pray that it will be a good surgery, it'll go well, and he will recover quickly. We also ask, O Lord, that you would be with Paula as she tends to him and drives him back and forth to doctor's appointments and the surgery. And that you be with us, O Lord, as we study your word today. And be with all those who are traveling for Thanksgiving. May they know your presence, your grace, and your strength. We pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, I also want to remind you, and as I did, I reminded you about this Sunday being a special thing. We also have a commemorative mug for everyone who will be here on Sunday, and highlighting the church, and we're not handing them out until then. And we're asking just one per person to take. We may sell some leftovers later if we have any. One per person. Member. You're a member, so you get your one. Is that okay? All right. Okay, so we talked the last time about making the lampstands, and right, we did 37 and 38. We haven't done 38. We did 37. Okay. All right. So verse 1 of chapter 38. I don't always mark where I am, and I prep for everything. He made the altar of burnt offering also of acacia wood. It was 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. It was square and 3 cubits high. He made horns for it on its 4 corners. Its horns were of one piece with it, and he overlaid it with bronze. Other parts have been what? What's been mostly the other things? Gold and silver. This one's bronze. I have no idea if this is where we got the idea of the Olympic medals being gold, silver, and bronze. I don't think so. But let's give a stretch to that. Yeah. Well, gold, silver, and bronze, though, in that order, it does look like that's the preciousness of them. Or at least it's been that way in the ancient world and also still today. He made all the utensils of the altar, the pots, the shovels, the basins, the forks, and the fire pans. All its utensils he made of bronze, so everything in here is bronze. He made for the altar a grating, a network of bronze under its ledge, extending halfway down. He cast 4 rings on the 4 corners of the bronze grating to hold the poles. He made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with bronze. And he put the poles through the rings on the sides of the altar to carry it with them, and he made it hollow with boards. He made the basin of bronze with its stand of bronze from the mirrors of the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So what you have the Ark of the Covenant is what we always think about, having the rings and having the poles, but also an altar for burnt offerings. That was also done that way. And the intention was that all of these things are what? Why would you put rings and poles on it? To carry them. They're portable. And so what you have is tent. That's really what it is. It is a large tent, the tabernacle, and it has various areas where people can go to and come up to, but there's one area where it is the tent of meeting or the Holy of Holies. Actually, it's the Holy of Holies, where the high priest would go into one day a year. Do you remember what that day is? The Day of Atonement. Or Yom Kippur, and that is Day of Atonement in Hebrew. So, and so they only went in on that day, they only went in one day. Now, when it's portable, they're going to have to be able to move about and to put things in. And what we don't have here, but you will have later on in the book of Numbers, it will continue on discussing all of this. It'll reiterate it to a certain extent, but then it will assign certain priests or priestly families the responsibility of transporting the materials. And so they are charged with doing that. Now, what's interesting is, to me, is you still have certain things that are like that. There is a family in Jerusalem that has the keys to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They are not Christians. They are actually Muslims. That family has had responsibility for unlocking and locking that church up since the 12th century, when it was overrun in one of the Crusades, and when the last Crusade, whenever the last Crusade, I may have the dates wrong on that, but whenever the last Crusade, when Saladin won, which is actually a little later than that, I believe, he put that family in charge of that, so the Christians could come in, they could use it, but they had to be out at a certain time, and it would be opened at a certain time. No, never before and never after. And that's continued on for hundreds of years. And it's the same family. They're called the Johnny family. And they have the keys. And they unlock it, they lock it, and that's the way it is. And you better be there. You can't be there. Well, you can be there earlier, but you're not getting in. And you got to leave to get out. You can't get out because they lock they lock the doors. Now the priests have a way of getting in and out. Church of the Holy Sepulchre is unique in that it is not just one religious group that's running it. There are 3 distinct groups: Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox, and then there are the Syrian Christians, who there's another group that they also are in there. And all 3, to make any changes to the building, all 3 have to agree. And they never agree. It's fascinating. When you're in there, you go in and you're there and you see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you see all of this. But if you turn around and look at the back, there's this little balcony with a ladder to get up to it. The reason, and it's obvious, it's a construction ladder that was made a couple of hundred years ago. And it's because they couldn't agree on what kind of stairs to get up to it. So you don't use the balcony because the ladder is unsteady and unsafe. But they can't agree yet. And now it's just like it's a thing for the tourists, the pilgrims, to see that they couldn't agree on this a couple hundred years ago as to what the ladder or what the stairwell should look like. People are interesting, aren't they? And we are the way we are because we've got hundreds and thousands of years of being that way. So those families are still the families who are supposed to be in charge. So he made the court for the south side. The hangings of the court were of fine twisted linen, 100 cubits long. Its 20 pillars and their 20 bases were of bronze. But the hooks of the pillars and their bands were of silver. So we get some mixing of different colors or different metals here. For the north side, there were hangings 100 cubits long. Its 20 pillars and their 20 bases were bronze. But the hooks of the pillars and their bands were of silver. For the west side, there were hangings 50 cubits long with 10 pillars and 10 bases. The hooks of the pillars and their bands were of silver. And we can assume there that the bases there were bronze. It just skips what they are. So what do you have? You have a box. That's the courtyard. And it's 50 by 100. So it's a rectangular box or square. And for the front to the east, 50 cubits. The hangings on the one side of the gate were 15 cubits with 3 pillars and 3 bases. And so for the other side, on each side of the gate of the court, were hangings of 15 cubits with 3 pillars and 3 bases. All the hangings around the court were of fine twisted linen. The bases for the pillars were of bronze, but the hooks of the pillars and the bands were of silver. The overlaying of their capitals was also of silver, and all the pillars of the court were banded with silver. The screen for the entrance to the court was embroidered with needlework in blue, purple, and crimson yarns and fine twisted linen. So blue, purple, and crimson is red. Those colors actually do work, but they're very bold. What also do you think this tells you just by the colors? Regal. Yep, regal. Regal works. Expensive. Why the expensive? Because purple for thousands of years was the most expensive color you could wear. Only the wealthy wore purple. You see it in Jesus when he uses the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. He says the rich man wore purple, which lets you know he was wealthy. You also have in the book of Acts, you have Lydia, and she is a businesswoman, and she is wealthy. And we know that because she is a seller of purple. So she's a broker, a purple commodities trader is what we think, something along those lines. And what the other reason why we know she's wealthy is she funds Paul's journey. He gets to stay there, and she pays for everything. And she sends them on their way when they go with funds. So one of those persons who is extremely wealthy in Scripture. And usually purple is reserved for royalty in the ancient world because it was so expensive. Now the reason why it's so expensive is because you had to travel to get it. The dye for the purple came out of reeds that were hard to get to. Like reeds that grow on a bank. The Philistines were that area. That was part of that area where they could get the purple, and they were also referred to as purple people. See, it's not the Minnesota Vikings. So and blues, blue is It's nice. We all like blue and red, but the purple is the thing that stands out. And somehow this all came together. It was 20 cubits long, and along the width of it, 5 cubits high, corresponding to the hangings of the court. There were 4 pillars. Their 4 bases were of bronze, their hooks of silver, and the overlaying of their capitals and their bands of silver. All the pegs for the tabernacle and all the court all around were of bronze. Now remember, the way they're doing this, like, they don't have nails. We're not doing the Iron Age here necessarily with some of these things. What they're doing is they do have some tools, and they are drilling holes. They figured out how to do that. So they're drilling holes, and then they're fitting pieces together with pegs. I think I told you the last time we met, my grandmother's, her husband, she buried a couple of husbands, and her third husband, who outlived her like 6 months, then he passed away. But he was from Massachusetts, and he had a house that was built in the 17th century. All right, so 1600s, latter part. And he said there wasn't a nail in the house. It was wood and pegs. They put the pegs to fit the wood together. He also said, do you know what's really fascinating about a house that's built in the 17th century? You can't drive a nail into the wall because the wood does what? It hardens, it petrifies. And so concrete does that too. We put a wood floor in the last church I served. That concrete floor was poured in 1927. So I was there from 2000 to 2005, and we had a wood floor that went bad. And so we had to replace it. So we replaced it with some oak flooring because that was easier wood to get than the wood that was there, which was a heart of pine wood, which was a throwaway wood back in the 1920s, but it's very expensive now and hard to find. And termites can't eat it, or they don't eat it. So that's why it was there, but we did have some water and it rotted and some of that. So we had to replace that floor. Well, we had to put new stringers down, and we had a guy who actually put flooring in. That was his job, and he was volunteering. He was a trustee, and he was helping to do that. And we would go to Home Depot, and we got these tap cons to drill into the thing. So we'd drill in, and we'd get 4 holes and have to replace the bit because this concrete was at that point 75 years, a little longer than 75 years, and concrete keeps getting harder and harder and harder. It's a chemical reaction. And so when it continues, it just gets hard. So this is fascinating to me. I know it's kind of, in some ways, laborious and boring to kind of work through, but everything they're doing is with hand tools, and they're artisans, and they're fitting it all together, and they're putting it together, and they're able to break it apart, travel, put it back together. I don't know about you, but I have trouble keeping track of parts. Do you, when you do work and things like that? Just moving it from one room to another can be a task. And they're moving miles each time they take it down and put it back up. That's why in the time when they get into the promised land, what do? They put it up permanently, and it doesn't move. It goes to Shechem, and it stays there. And it's there until the temple is built a couple hundred years later. And then all of the furnishings get moved into the temple, and they are there until they're overrun and captured.
But did they put that up every time they stopped?
That is...
Keep it until knowing that they were going to put it up when they...
That's a great question. I'm not sure. Because the indication is they're to always travel with it and to have it always set up, because what we'll see when we get to chapter 40 is God will reside over it. So it almost sounds like, yeah, they broke it down, moved, put it back up. That's a lot of work. But that's what it sounds like, but we're not sure. it would make sense that if you're traveling, you would only set it up where you knew you were going to reside for a time. That would make sense. But making sense of,
How much they resided for any length of time anywhere.
well, we know that they're going to be for 40 years in the wilderness. That's not here yet. God knew,
Yeah.
but they're going to be wandering.
But we don't know when actually they made it either.
Yeah, we
How
do.
far into it.
Yeah, they're making this before they start traveling. They've gone, they've
Crossed the Red Sea.
they've crossed the Red Sea. They're in that desert area. They've been on the mountain. They've received the commandments, and now they're making it. Before they go into the promised land, they're making this. But what's going to happen is we're going to go through this, then in the order, right? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy. In the book of Numbers, you pick up with narrative again. And in Numbers, they send the spies out. And then the spies come back, and 12 spies, one representing each of the tribes. They come back, 10 of them give a report that says, it's scary, we can't fight these people, there are giants in the land. They brought back grapes that took 2 men to carry. I mean, I can't even imagine that. But that symbol of 2 men having a pole with grapes is actually the tourism sign for Israel now. But they did that. So the 10 go in. They say they say giants. They said the Nephilim are in the land, and the Nephilim are believed to be angelic figures that fell and somehow bred, which makes no sense to us based on other knowledge we have of angelic beings and humans. And it's thought Goliath is a descendant of the Nephilim in the time of David. You get that with some commentators. So you have that, and they're frightened, and they say they have walled cities, we're not going to be able to take them. Right? Walled cities, store that away. Jericho, 40 years later, the walled city, the walls come tumbling down. So, but you have 2 of the spies, do you remember their names? Caleb, and the other one? Joshua. They come back and they say, yeah, everything they said is true, but we can take them because God is with us. Because God got us through the Red Sea. God got us, sent the 10 plagues, right? They recite in the book of Numbers all of the times where God saw them through. Right? When they fought the Amalekites and Moses' arms were kept up, they recite all of that. And they say, God's got this. And the people said, we side with them. And then my favorite part of that, in the book of Numbers, they try to go in the next day on their own. And they're repelled. And then they have to wander for 40 years until that generation of adults die out. Now, there's a question in the way the Hebrew is as to who are the adults that have to die out. Is it everybody 20 and up, or is it everybody 40 and up? But they have to die out. They wander the wilderness, and this is the other part that sounds fantastical. Their clothing doesn't wear out, nor do their sandals. And that doggone manna stays with them. The manna stays with them until the day they go into the promised land, and then it stops. These are the records of the tabernacle of the covenant, which were drawn up at the commandment of Moses, the work of the Levites being under the direction of Ithamar, son of the priest Aaron, Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, made all that the Lord commanded Moses. So they're doing this while they're still in the wilderness. All the gold that was used for the work in the construction of the sanctuary, the gold from the altar, was 29 talents. And 730 shekels, measured by the sanctuary shekel, which was a specific unit of money. The talents, there's 29 talents. This is like millions of dollars. Let's put it that way. Because it's a huge amount. A talent would be able to feed you for like 3 years. This is 29 talents, so it's a lot. The silver from those of the congregation who were counted was 100 talents and 1,000 shekels measured by the sanctuary shekel. A beka a head, that is half a shekel, measured by the sanctuary shekel, for everyone who was counted in the census from 20 years old and upward, for 630,550 men. That's why we say it's more than 1 million people. Maybe closer to 2 million. Only the men are counted. The men are counted, and the men that are counted are 20 and up. That's where I get the number that says, was it 20-year-olds to 60-year-olds who died out in the punishment? Which is kind of odd, right? When do you become a man in the Hebrew religion? 13, right? You go through a bar mitzvah, and girls go through now because, parity, a bat mitzvah, because the word for daughter is bat, the word for son is bar. So the bar mitzvah, so it's 13, but only the men over 20 were counted. And that's over 650,000 people, men. So there are kids. There are women who aren't counted, wives, daughters, old maids, widows, of all kinds of people that are not counted. I'm not saying that because I'm trying to be mean to you ladies. I'm just saying that's the way it was. They didn't count the women. When Jesus feeds the thousands on the plain and on the mount, it is meant to be the men who are counted, not the women. So it's even larger numbers than what we can imagine. So they did a census to know how much it equated to per person came in. The 100 talents of silver were for casting the bases of the sanctuary and the bases of the curtain. 100 bases for the 100 talents, for the 100 talents, a talent for the base. Of the 1,775 shekels, he made hooks for the pillars and overlaid their capitals and made bands for them. The bronze that was contributed was 70 talents and 2,400 shekels. With it he made the bases for the entrance of the tent of meeting, the bronze altar, and the bronze grating for it, and the utensils of the altar, the bases all around the court, and the bases of the gate of the court, of all the pegs of the tabernacle, and all the pegs around the court. I'm sorry, my eye skipped, and I was trying to find the sentence. So you got all of this stuff going on. What do you notice about reading that, or what I just read to you? Specificity, right? There's specific numbers. There may be a little bit of estimating going on, but these are very specific numbers and how it's used and how it's allotted. Now remember this. What other thing do we know from early on when this was mentioned? Right? They did the offering. What did Moses have to tell the people? Stop giving so much. We have more than enough. Stop giving. Oh, I wish I could do that some Sunday. I know some of you would break into applause, but there's always need. These folks are so generous. Now, what's so wild to me is not to make fun of anybody who has mental illness, but they're almost bipolar in their relationship with God. They run hot and cold. Oh, yes, we're going to give all of this. They trust God. But then they don't, they trust the spies who go into the land. Or they get mad. We'll do everything you say. Well, except what we don't like. Because they'll violate. They still have to do, remember, Moses still has a court system going on where people are in charge. You weren't here yet, but Moses' father-in-law tells him that he's going to wear himself out if he's judging every argument that all these people are having. So every day he's sitting down and they're lined up, as my grandmother would say, down the block. And so they wind up with individuals over 50 people, over 100 people, over 500 people, over 1,000, and Moses only gets the really big cases in order to decide arguments. You've got to delegate. Yes, I know. I have to always remember to do that too. But you know what? Most of us type A people, which I'm not, I know, I own that. It's just easier to do it yourself because you do it the way you want it done, right? Isn't that the way it is? The hardest thing is to trust others enough to let them fail. Sometimes. But we were getting ready for our church conference, and I called Madison. I said, Madison, I never worked on these forms. I'm just going to send them to you. Can you fill them out and send them back? She said, sure. She did it in half an hour. I tried on one thing, and 2 hours later, I'm like, give it to her, get this information, because it's just better. And that's what happens sometimes. I have started to tell people sometimes, they say, well, Pastor, you know how this works, how you do these things? I'm like, you know what? I'm actively choosing not to know how that works. Because I'll let somebody else do that. Because I can't keep all of that straight. Janine says I have to outlive her, though, because she doesn't know how to make the TV work without me. We have 4. I believe that. Yeah, I've had to come up and fix stuff. She used to do a Bible study in her house years and years ago. And one time I was away. And she was watching something, she was trying to do the Bible study on the thing and something didn't work. She came up and got our older son out of Boy Scouts, drove him home. He turned it on for her. She drove him back and then went back. And he's like, Mom, you just do this, this, this. She says, you're just like your father. You tell me how to do it, but you do it so quickly, I don't know. So, all of this, we get all of what they're doing, and they had even more because there were enough of them, and how did they get this gold? They were slaves. Remember how they got the gold? The Egyptians gave it to them. They paid them to go, is what it was. Take whatever you want. Just leave. I've never had anybody pay me to leave. Not for on here. I'm going to tell them a story later after we're done, after we go offline. So Barbara, your job is to ask me about that story, about paying to leave, okay? Okay, chapter 39. Of the purple, blue, and crimson yarns, they made finely worked vestments for ministering in the holy place, and they made the sacred vestments for Aaron as the Lord had commanded Moses. This is the ephod and all of the things. We kind of skipped some of these chapters, but it is this finely done thing where it is set up that only the high priest would wear that. He made the ephod of gold and of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and of fine twisted linen. Gold leaf was hammered out and cut into threads to work into the blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and into the fine twisted linen in skilled design. They made for the ephod shoulder pieces joined to it at its 2 edges. The decorated band on it was the same materials and workmanship of gold, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns. and of fine twisted linen, as the Lord had commanded Moses. The onyx stones were prepared, enclosed in settings of gold filigree and engraved like the engravings of a signet, according to the names of the sons of Israel. He set them on the shoulder pieces of the ephod to be stones of remembrance for the sons of Israel, as the Lord had commanded Moses. So, how many of these stones are there? There are 12, because Israel had, right? Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, has 12 sons. Now, we're going to see later in the book of Numbers that the tribes are going to kind of be shifted around. You have two names. Right? There's no tribe of Joseph. But there are Joseph's two sons who are given status as tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. And the reason why they are there too is not just because Joseph was Israel's favorite, though he was. But the reason for that is Levi will not be given an inheritance in the land, because the tribe of Levi, which is the priestly family, they will be dispersed all through the land because they have to do religious responsibilities in communities. Now, they don't have at this time the synagogue. That will develop later during the Babylonian captivity. But they will have responsibilities in their community. They are learned. They learn the scriptures. They instruct. They judge people, right? Those kinds of things. And then they will have responsibilities to either go to the tabernacle once a year, at least, to work, or later on into the temple. John's father of John the Baptizer, his Zechariah, will be at the temple during his duty when the angel of the Lord will come to him and say, your wife's going to have a child. And he laughs and says, no, she's not. She's barren. And he's struck dumb that he can't speak until his child is born. And how does he communicate? He names the child John. He writes it on a slate. And he writes John. And then he says, his name is John. He's able to talk. Okay. He made the breastpiece in skilled work, like the work of the ephod, of gold, of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and of the fine twisted linen. It was square, it was made double, a span in length, and a span in width when doubled. They set it in 4 rows of stones. A row of carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald was, and the second row of a turquoise, a sapphire, and a moonstone. And the third row, a hyacinth, an agate, and an amethyst. And the fourth row, a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. They were enclosed in settings of gold filigree. There were 12 stones with names corresponding to the names of the sons of Israel. They are like signets, each engraved with its name for the 12 tribes. They made on the breastpiece chains of pure gold, twisted like cords, and they made 2 settings of gold filigree and 2 gold rings, and put the 2 rings on the edges of the breastpiece, not for poles to pick them up, but, to hang the chains. And they put the 2 cords of gold and the 2 rings at the edge of the breastpiece. The 2 ends of the 2 cords they had attached to the 2 settings of filigree. In this way, they attached it in front to the shoulder pieces of the ephod. Then they made 2 rings of gold and put them at the 2 ends of the breastpiece on its inside edge next to the ephod. They made 2 rings of gold and attached them in front to the lower part of the 2 shoulder pieces of the ephod and its joining above. The decorated band of the ephod, they bound the breastpiece by its rings to the rings of the ephod with blue cord so that it would lie on a decorated band of the ephod, and that breastpiece would not come loose from the ephod as the Lord had commanded Moses. So it's sort of like it's different pieces, but it's not stitching it, but they attach them so that they come together, so it won't come off. Now, we do know that later on, after time, when the high priest goes in, most likely because some of them died in the Holy of Holies because they didn't confess their sin, they were judged for whatever reason, they would go in. They actually had bells attached to the ephod, which I think will come up here too, but they will attach a rope around their waist in order to pull them out if they die. And I had a friend in seminary who said that he said, you have a couple die and you can't get them out, and you start putting the rope on because you need to. Because you can't go in, right? Well, the next high priest can, but you don't want him doing that, because what happens when you touch a dead body in Judaism? You're unclean. So you can't go in and touch a dead body, because then you're made unclean. And you're in the Holy of Holies where you have to be clean. You see the catch-22 there? It's a vicious circle. Yeah, the bells are in here. He also made the robe of the ephod woven in all the blue yarn, and the opening of the robe in the middle of it was like an opening of a coat of mail, with a binding around the opening so that it might not be torn. On the lower hem of the robe they made pomegranates of blue, purple, and crimson yarns, and of fine twisted linen. They also made bells of pure gold, and put the bells between the pomegranates on the lower hem of the robe all around, and between the pomegranates, a bell and a pomegranate, a bell and a pomegranate. So it's a repeating pattern. That's why it's saying it that way. All around on the lower hem of the robe for ministering, as the Lord had commanded Moses. They also made the tunics woven of fine linen for Aaron and his sons, and the turban of fine linen, and the headdresses of the fine linen, and the linen undergarments of fine twisted linen, and the sash of fine twisted linen, and of blue, purple, and crimson yarns embroidered with the needlework, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And they made the rosette of the holy diadem of pure gold, and wrote on it an inscription like the engraving of a signet, "Holy to the Lord." They tied to it a blue cord to fasten it on the turban above, as the Lord had commanded Moses. So doing is as God had commanded Moses for them to do. Yes? It's very specific. So there's a turban kind of thing and a headpiece on it. There is this the bottom hem, which has bells on it made out of gold, so that's expensive too. And everywhere the high priest steps, what do you hear? The bells, right? The tinkling of the bell. And that serves two purposes. The first, I've already told you. When he goes into the Holy of Holies, the bell's ringing, and as he's moving around, they know he's still alive. While he's in there, yeah, he's moving around. What would be the other purpose of the bells? Music to God? Well, that's a nice one. Not the reason. Not what I was thinking about. Here's what. Tabernacle's over here. High priest's tent is way over here. He's got to get from here to there. And it's Day of Atonement. On the Day of Atonement, which we had that earlier in chapter 16, he has to take a series of baths. Why does he have to take the series of baths? Because he has to be clean. So he's over here, he's taking a bath. Puts on the piece of, he gets dressed. He's here. And between there, all the people are lined up to see him go, right? Or there are people milling about. What do they get to hear? The bells. What do the bells tell them? Don't touch the high priest. It's sort of like a backup beep, right? With your truck. Yeah, this backing up. Yeah, clear out. That's the purpose of the bells. It's so they know that they're alive, but it's also to get out of the way. So that, because you don't want to be, do you responsible for killing the high priest because you touched him and you're unclean? Now, the people were supposed to be clean that day too. They took baths, and he will do, and the whole purpose of the Day of Atonement is making atonement for the people so that they are ceremonially clean that day. But to get to that, you got to confess your sin, and you got to admit that you are a sinner and that you are separated from God and all of those kinds of things. And how good are we at doing that? Not as good as we should be. Right? I think I've told you the story. I grew up in a different expression of Christian faith when I was a kid. And I went to one of the schools, and they would take us every Friday to confessional. As a class, we sat, and we went in order, and they made us sit in alphabetical order. So I guess the priest could figure out who was coming in. All I know is I had time with the D name. Didn't have as much time as, the kids with the W last name. So they could think it through. I'm trying to figure out, and I'm, 8. What I did wrong. What do I have to confess? The standard ones were, I disobeyed my parents. Easy. That happened on a daily basis. But after that, I got nothing. One day, I think I said, because I heard somebody else say, I lusted in my heart. I didn't know what lust was. So you have that. So they're wearing all of those, and that is all going on. All right, verse 32. We're going to get it there, I promise you. In this way, all the work of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, was finished. The Israelites had done everything just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Then they brought the tabernacle to Moses, the tent and all of its utensils, its hooks, its frames, its bars, its pillars and its bases, the covering of tanned rams' skins and the covering of fine leather and the curtain for the screen. The ark of the covenant with its poles and the mercy seat, the table with its utensils and the bread of the presence. The pure lampstand with its lamp set on it and all of its utensils and the oil for the light, the golden altar, the anointing oil and the fragrant incense and the screen for the entrance of the tent. The bronze altar and its grating of bronze, its poles and all its utensils, the basin with its stand. The hangings of the court, its pillars and its bases, and the screen for the gate of the court, its cords and its pegs, and all the utensils for the service of the tabernacle, for the tent of meeting, the finely worked vestments for ministering in the holy place, the sacred vestments for the priest Aaron, and the vestments of his sons to serve as priests, because they're apprentices, because one day they will be the high priest, if they survive, and not all of them will. Because they will burn strange fire. They will sin. They will fail. The Israelites had done all the work just as the Lord had commanded Moses. When Moses saw that they had done all the work just as the Lord had commanded, he blessed them. Moses blessed them. It's his way of saying thank you for doing exactly what he had told them to do, that the Lord had told him to do. So, what we have here is the man who says, they're not going to listen to me because they don't know me. He is giving them a blessing. Chapter 40. We're near the end. We have 6 minutes. We may go over about 3. The Lord spoke to Moses, on the first day of the first month you shall set up the temple or the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. On the first day of the first month you'll set it up. You shall put in it the ark of the covenant. You shall screen the ark with the curtain. You shall bring in the table and arrange its setting, and you shall bring in the lampstand and set up its lamps. You shall put the golden altar for incense before the ark of the covenant and set up the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. You shall set the altar of burnt offering before the entrance of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting, and place the basin between the tent of meeting and the altar and put water in it. So what you have is the tent of meeting, right? The center part, the Holy of Holies, that's the Ark of the Covenant. Outside of that, you have these other things. Because That's where the daily sacrifices and offerings take place. We had a question a couple of weeks ago. How often were they offering these things? Every day. Every day they had certain offerings that they had to do. So that's why, yeah, did they take it down and put it up? Or how often did they do it? We don't know. I mean, the implication of it is it's supposed to be always set up. But you can't move it if it's not set up. And if you move it, you can't go that far. Now, how many of you remember circuses? I love circuses. I really did. Breaking down a circus and packing it up is like, well, yes, but it's logistics, and they know how to do it. I have seen, these circuses that set up in 3 rings and that, out in the field, they had a tent. I've been to those. I'm old enough to remember that. And they set up in a day. They did their performances, right? Usually 3, 4 performances, maybe over a weekend or something like that. On Monday, you never knew they were there, except that their truck ruts where they drove the truck in and they packed everything down. Because apparently everybody in the circus has a job in setting up and breaking down. Exactly. And you can't carry it on a cart. No. This is so really you think that they're camping, but their movements are small. That's one of the reasons why it's taking them a while to get to the promised land. And then when they get the punishment, then they just wander. And you can we have some ideas of some of where they went, and when they come into the promised land, they come from the Jordan side, right? They have to cross the river Jordan to go in. So in Egypt, I'm reverse of you. I have to remember. I see the map, Egypt over here, promised land up here, desert area, trouble, all this. And they will go to this, they will do all of this kind of stuff. Then they will travel, and the wilderness wanderings, they can't go into the promised land, and when they eventually go in, they go in this way. It's like, how? Well, that's how they do it. And Moses dies on Mount Nebo. That's the mountain, that's the highest mountain in Jordan's area, and he gets to go up and see the promised land, and then he dies. And it says, and all it says in Deuteronomy, at the end of it, is, and God buried him. Now, it says he dies and God buries him. Some of us think probably Moses was treated like Elijah and Enoch, and God just took him into his presence. We'd like to think that. I don't know. Most preachers I know, we identify with Moses because there are stubborn people in our churches sometimes. There are, we're hearing a voice of God, and we're hoping that others hear that voice too and will follow. Sometimes we might think that people around us are stiff-necked, maybe, sometimes, like the children of Israel were. So on the first day, they set it up. And you're right. They have wheels, carts. They're made out of wood. And you know how well that works, too. Wood wears down. Axles break. But they're not allowed. This has to be hand-carried. If you're one of the priestly families that has to carry the Ark of the Covenant, you only have a limited part of your life you can do that. Because that gold's going to get heavier. And those poles, and that's how you do it. And that's why in David's time, when they take it on a cart one time, it's bad. And then the cart, the animal, we think, slips somehow and it falls off the cart. And one person goes to catch it and he dies. And I know preachers who say, that's not fair. I understand it's not fair. But those were the rules that they signed up for, that they knew. And what that text indicates is how far they had fallen with not honoring the rules that God had laid out before them. You shall bring in the table and arrange it in the lampstand and set up its lamps. You shall put the golden altar for incense before the Ark of the Covenant and set up the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. You shall set the altar of burnt offering before the entrance of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting, and place the basin between the tent of meeting and the altar, and put water in it. You shall set up the court all around and hang up the screen for the gate of the court. Then shall take the anointing oil and anoint the tabernacle and all that is in it, and consecrate it and all its furniture, so that it shall become holy. You shall also anoint the altar of burnt offering and all its utensils, and consecrate the altar, so that the altar shall be most holy. You shall also anoint the basin with its stand and consecrate it. Then you shall bring Aaron and his sons to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and shall wash them with water, and put on Aaron the sacred vestments. And you shall anoint him and consecrate him, so that he may serve me as priest. You shall bring his sons also, and put tunics on them, and anoint them as you anointed their father, and they may serve me as priests. And their anointing shall admit them to a perpetual priesthood throughout all generations to come. And it will continue on for centuries until they disrupt it. The high priest in Jesus' time is not of the Aaronic line, because it dies out. And you will see a jockeying for position to rule. Because the high priest, in the ancient Israel, and right up until the first century, what you have is that the priest is a religious but also kind of a political leader. And so the priests speak to the king when they have a king, and has influence, because they can always play the God card. Well, we've prayed and God said do this. That's why the prophets sometimes are against the priests. Sometimes the priest is a prophet. Always the king is listed as what? In the book of Kings and in Chronicles, you will have a line that describes the king. He walked with God, or he walked in the way of his father. And when it says he walked in the ways of his father, most of the time, was like one or two exceptions, because sometimes the father walked with God. But most of the time when it says he walks in the way of his fathers, it meant that the father, that he was an idolater like his father and corrupted the leading. The intention, though, when they're getting ready to go into the promised land, is it's a theocratic nation, that the priest or spokesperson for God, the high priest, would, in a sense, rule the people. But it was really more of everybody did what was right because they were supposedly taught what was right. It's not everyone did what they thought was right in their own heart. It is that they had the teaching of the priest who spoke for God. And then the people will corrupt it, and then they will say, they have a king, they have a king, they have a king, we want a king. We want to be just like everybody else. Anybody have children ever give them that line? Or as a child gave that? Well, Mom, so-and-so's getting to do it. I always had one kid. There was this kid named Mark. Michael. It was Michael. There was another one named Mark. But if Michael was allowed to do it, then I could do it. I tried really hard to get, but Michael was a goody-goody. Michael was so smart in class. I saw him do this one time. I didn't cheat off of him. I didn't cheat off of anybody. But he would take a test and write the wrong answers down really fast, and then erase it and write the right answers and hand it in, because the kid behind him always cheated. And that kid would get so mad. They finally came clean and said, I wrote what Michael wrote, and he's got an A. How do you do that? Well, he would erase and write the right answers down. So all of this is done. All of this is anointed, generations to come. Moses did everything as the Lord had commanded him. In the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, the tabernacle was set up. Moses set up the tabernacle. He laid its bases and set up its frames and put in its poles and raised up its pillars. And he spread the tent over the tabernacle and put the covering of the tent over it as the Lord had commanded Moses. So the impression you're having here is the 80-plus-year-old man is the one setting it up. I would hazard to guess most likely he's getting assistance to do this. I hope so. He took the covenant and put it into the ark and put the poles on the ark and set the mercy seat above the ark. And he brought the ark into the tabernacle and set up the curtain for screening and screened the ark of the covenant. Now, at this point, what's in the ark of the covenant? Only the Ten Commandments, the covenant. What will wind up in there? Aaron's staff, because that'll happen in the book of Numbers, and a jar of manna. The last day they collect manna before they go in, they're told to collect a jar and to place it in the Ark of the Covenant. So those three items will be there. The tablets that Moses created, Aaron's staff, and the reason why it's Aaron's staff is because there'll be an argument over whether Aaron should be the real leader or not. And they will take staffs and plant them in the ground overnight, and Aaron's staff buds. And so Aaron's staff, yes, it's Aaron. And then the jar of manna is not so you have leftovers, but to remind them of what? That God provided for them. And we really don't know what manna is, because literally manna is translated, what is it? So they're asking, you got some of that manna? You got some of that, what is it? I got to cook tonight, you know. It's never good for a husband to say to his wife, this tastes okay, what is it? It doesn't go well. All right, verse 22, right? He put the table in the tent of meeting and on the north side of the tabernacle outside the curtain and set the bread on it before the Lord. This is the showbread as the Lord had commanded Moses. He put the lampstand in the tent of meeting opposite the table on the south side of the tabernacle and set up the lamps before the Lord as the Lord had commanded Moses. He put the golden altar in the tent of meeting before the curtain and offered fragrant incense on it as the Lord had commanded Moses. He also put in place the screen for the entrance of the tabernacle. He set the altar of burnt offering at the entrance of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting and offered on it the burnt offering and the grain offering as the Lord had commanded Moses. He set the basin between the tent of meeting and the altar and put water in it for washing, with which Moses and Aaron and his sons washed their hands and their feet. When they went into the tent of meeting and when they approached the altar, they washed as the Lord had commanded Moses. He set up the court around the tabernacle and the altar and put up the screen at the gate of the court. So Moses finished the work. One last bit. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud settled upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Whenever the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on each stage of their journey. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not set out until the day that it was taken up. For the cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and fire was in the cloud by night, before the eyes of all the house of Israel at each stage of their journey. It is the pillar that led them by day and the fire that led them by night, and it would merge and rest there. When it says the glory, the word that is used there in Hebrew is the Shekinah glory, which is this regalness of God and this beautiful, and it's what they got to experience. The Shekinah glory will be on the tabernacle. It will be on the temple. It will depart at times when they sin. But on the temple, It will be there. It will take up residence when Solomon dedicates the temple. He prays this prayer. It's a beautiful prayer. And when he's finished with the prayer, the Shekinah glory comes and dwells on the people, on the tabernacle, or on the temple. But when his son comes to power, and when they start doing all this craziness with idolatry, it will say, the glory of the Lord departed. It's hard to imagine, and yet we do stupid stuff, don't we? We do things that draw us away from God, right? As a kid, I remember you always hurt the one you love. I remember hearing that as an expression. It's not right, but we know that it happens. Those closest to us we take for granted. We look for loopholes about stuff. And that's what the people will do. They will come up with loopholes and end arounds to violate God's law. And then they will practice idolatry. Idolatry is the worst of the sins for anybody who claims to be God's people. Because what it does is it means that we take our affection for God and we place our affection on something else. And we call it God. And we trust it rather than the God who's made us. That's why you have books like Hosea, which is a prophet who has an acted out parable. There's some biblical scholars argue whether Hosea is a real person or not. Or if he's was a real person, and yet his name is lent to the story, because in the book of Hosea, what Hosea is told to do is go marry the village prostitute. Her name is Gomer. Have some children, and she's going to depart. She's going to play the harlot. She's going to leave you. And then what he does is he buys her back. She's on a slave sale, and he buys her back because she's his wife, and he loves her. Even though God told him to go marry. Can you imagine being Hosea's mom and dad going, "You're marrying who?" Talk about mother and father-in-law issues. And so you have that, and it tells us, this is how my people have acted with me. Meaning God is like Hosea. That's why it's an acted parable. That there is a representation of Hosea being like God, who pursues the person who and gives them love, and they're unworthy of receiving it. And yet, we're all unworthy. So, we did all of those things with the tabernacle. Oh, that was hard. I'm going to go have a nice long drink of water because I just kept talking. But it is all important because every aspect of the tabernacle was meant to remind them of how God was with them, how God had led them out, and that every fiber, and there is fiber, right, of the creation of this, they made it out of the things that they had been given, the gold, the silver, the bronze, the yarns, the linen, all of that they took from Egypt, from the Egyptians. They do all of that. They make that all. And it was all to remind them that God was with them. And that the tabernacle, and later the temple, was where you went to meet God. Because we need a localized place. I know, I believe the church is not the building. The church is the people. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in the name of Jesus, there is the church. It is. That's theologically, I get that. I understand that. But we need these kind of places. On September 11th, 2001, I was in Tallahassee representing the church at some meeting. And when we found out, by the time we found out one of the towers was gone down, the 4th plane that landed that crashed in Pennsylvania was still in the air. And we were dismissed from our meeting. We had to come back at a later time. And we came back, and then they dismissed us. We gave up our hotel room. We came back. I needed to get to my family, to my church. Drove crazy speeds from Tallahassee to Tampa. Made it in record time. I left at 3:30, quarter to 4. I was back at 7 o'clock in Tampa. Oh, yeah. The only police officers I saw, Florida Highway Patrolmen, were on every overpass bridge that I drove under. They were watching the interstate. And traffic, I was just going with traffic. Everybody was trying to get home. We gave up our hotel room. They put 2 pilots in it because they were stuck because everything was grounded. But I was sitting there in the hotel room with 2 other guys from my church, one of which was an architect who kept saying, it couldn't have fallen. How did this fall? I studied this building in school. It can't fall. Well, it could when you have planes that size and they're fully loaded with gas. That one